Genesis chapter 8, verse 5. We're going to continue taking a look at the waters receding from the flood upon the earth. And then at the end of this video, we'll step back and look at the overall timeline because we've seen a lot of little chronological indicators along the way. We'll step back and see kind of where we are in the broader frame of how long has this lasted and so on. So let's begin by reading. Tode hudor peruamenon elatanuta, heos tu decatu menos, inde to hin decatomeni, te prote tu menos, ophthesan hai kephalai ton ureon. Well, let's begin. I notice there's two clauses here, so we'll kind of take them in turn. And what's going to happen to the water? So the water's a subject here. You got a de. So the de is marking a bit of a shift. We've seen the water's coming down. The water's coming down. You got a bunch of kais, kai. Now we have a de, which is now marking a little bit of a transition that we're progressing towards a miniature little climax, or at least a turning point in the narrative as to what's happening to the water. So it's the water. Notice it's a nominative singular neuter. And then we begin with a participle. Now, most likely this is an adverbial participle. It's going to be modifying the main verb here. It's obviously from peruamai. It's a nominative singular neuter, so it's matching the subject here, present middle participle. So the water as it was going, or something to that effect. And then the main verb here is from elatoneo, which I think we've seen before. You see the lengthening on the front end. You got a middle ending there. This is a third singular imperfect middle indicative. And this means to lessen, perhaps to abate. And so the idea is that this water, as it was going upon the earth, is in the process of lessening or withdrawing. And so some would even argue that the basic idea is that the waters are gradually reducing, they're gradually lessening, which is why you would use this adverbial participle to pick up on that. And so basically it's a really nice translation actually. It's trying to say, look, this isn't happening in one day. It's not one big event. We're not looking at it perfectively. We're looking at it imperfectively. And this process, in fact, it lasts quite a bit of time. So we have the heos, so until, to decatu. You can probably guess that decatos means 10th. It's the 10th menos, which we saw in the prior video. That is the 10th month. So we've already jumped forward in time many weeks, actually. So this water is just progressively lessening up until the 10th month. Then, notice the raised dot there. Then we're going to see, okay, there's a bit of a change here. We mark that once again with the des. So you see those two des there. So like but or and in the hin decato. So you can probably guess if decatos here is 10th, throw a number 1 on the front end there with the breathe mark, the rough breathing. Hendecatos means 11th. So in the 11th month, notice you got meni there. And we're going to see what happens in the 11th month. But let me pause there. Once again, we have a bit of a difference with respect to what we know as the Hebrew text from the Masoretic tradition, that the Old Greek has updated this into to a certain extent to be the 11th month. It's the 10th month in the Masoretic text. And so, once again, there's a bit of slippage. We've seen that before. Not exactly sure why. It could be that what the translator understands the Hebrew to be saying is that, look, the waters were going down until the end of the 10th month, so to speak. And so then at the start of the next month, that's what the translator is sort of interpreting that as. Whereas in the Hebrew, it's more something like, look, it's all been happening up until the 10th month. We're kind of in the 10th month. And so let's tell you what's happening in the 10th month. And that's where you end up with the 10th in Hebrew. So it can be a little bit tricky to track the timeline between the two traditions, but that's where we are. So at least according to the Greek, in the 11th month, and then we find out it's on the prote, the first implied day, so that's why that's feminine. It's probably hemera in the translator's mind, of the month. So we're at the very first day of the month. So you can see it's not a big time difference between end of the 10th versus the first of the 11th. Main verb here, ophthesan. This is from horao, with that thesan ending plus the lengthening. This is going to be a third plural aorist passive indicative. But the passive of horao often means to be shown, to be revealed, to be seen, something like that. So what is seen? It's the kephalai. Of course, that's not the head, the cabeza, if you will. This is going to be like the peaks, if you will, the tops of the Orion, of the mountains. So we've seen the ark come to rest, but that doesn't imply that, obviously, it's still sort of in the water, because that's how buoyancy works. And so it still takes quite a bit of time for the waters to recede enough where most of the mountains now are starting to kind of poke through. So hence that time gap from the prior verse. So that's kind of where we are. we start to see dry land reappear, which again has all these really interesting echoes of the original creation event, as we've reiterated many, many times in this study of the flood narrative. We now see the waters receding and dry land appearing. Let's sort of pause before we move on from this verse down the road and put together the full timeline. Now, it's easier, in my opinion, to do it with the Masoretic text, which I do take to be, in this regard, the authentic text. There are, as we've already mentioned, these deviations in the Septuagint, plus or minus 10 days. We had that slippage from the 10th month to the 11th month. You could do a chart like this for the Septuagint. It's going to be that different. It's not meaningfully different, but here's the basic timeline. So day 0, if you want to call it that, that was in the 2nd month of the year, and on the 17th day, according to the Masoretic, and that's when the flood starts. That takes us back to Genesis 7:11, and all the floodgates open, that kind of thing. And we find out throughout really the next few verses, Genesis 7:17 is the clearest, that the actual rainfall and the water coming up from the earth and so forth, that lasts for 40 days, like this continuous flooding, if you will, where the water is actually increasing. That brings us up to the 3rd month and the 27th day, because in Hebrew reckoning, each day is an even 30 months, basically. So then the ark in the prior verses, and we've already seen this sort of be anticipated already in 7:24, but also I'd add 8:4, the prior video. Basically, the floodwaters last at their maximum capacity for 150 days, and it's the end of that, namely in 8:4, that the ark starts to rest on Ararat when it's starting to recede. So that takes us up to the 7th month on the 17th day in the Hebrew. Remember, it was updated in the Septuagint. And then in this verse, we are now, by my math, on day 224. That would take us from this 7th month, 17th day to the 1st day of the 10th month. You would add some time to that for the Septuagint. That's when the majority of the mountains become visible. So the flood is on the earth for basically 2/3 of a year, and it's still on the earth, by the way. We're just now starting to see the mountains peek through. So if you were kind of getting lost as to what's the overall time frame, that's what we're looking at. And by the way, these are, it's day 0 to day 40, and then it's day 0 to day 150. It's not connecting that. It's not day 50 after the 40. This is day 150 after the 0, if you're trying to keep track of my math here. So hopefully that works. I tried to check my work, but if not, you can add in the comments if I mess something up. But I think that's the right way to understand the timeline thus far. We're obviously not done yet, but I thought it'd be helpful to pull back and take a look at the timeline. So anyway, Genesis 8:5. Thank you.